Welcome to the Game Grove. I am Fel Ferry, and Stardew Valley is a very charming farming simulator that has been making waves since it was released in February 2016, and even more since its massive 1.5 update in December 2020. This game was developed by a single man under the alias of Concerned Ape. The amount of content and detail and heart that went into it revitalized the whole genre of farming simulation. If you have been living under a rock since 2016, you have a lot of very strange history to catch up on. And you should do that before watching this video. However, if you have been along for this crazy ride and already know about Stardew Valley, feel free to skip to the review section. The timecode is in the description below. And consider this your spoiler warning. Stardew Valley begins when your grandfather passes away and leaves you a letter. Years later, you're an employee of a mega corporation called Joja, and in your dystopian little cubicle life, you rediscover the letter. In it, you find a deed to a farm in Stardew Valley, and without any hesitation or experience in agriculture, you quit your job and set off. When you arrive, the mayor and the local carpenter are there to greet you. They show you around before you turn in for the day. You wake up the next morning with a full suite of tools in your pocket and a gift next to your bed, which turns out to be parsnip seeds. You go outside, plant them, and water them. The farm has been empty for a while, and the fields need to be cleared before you can plant any more parsnips. So you use your tools to get rid of sticks and weeds and rocks. Slowly, you will clear the area to farm more and more of the field. Some big rocks and tree stumps will require you to upgrade your tools, which you can only do by gathering ore in the mines, smelting it, and taking the bars to the blacksmith. You might then commission a barn or a coop from the local carpenter and start raising cows and goats for their milk, or chickens and ducks for their eggs. You might end up with a dinosaur mixed in there, or one of your chickens might turn evil. As you expand your operations on the farm and diversify the goods you're able to produce, you can build machines that can turn milk into cheese, fruit into wine, or eggs into mayo. When you tire of working in the fields or in the mines, you can always take a stroll into town and befriend the locals. Community life is a big part of the game, and you can participate in different seasonal events, befriend, or even marry some of the villagers and eventually have kids. But this does not even scratch the surface of what you get up to in Stardew Valley. You moved here to be a farmer, but before you know it, you are now also a gardener, a fisher, a miner, an apiculturist, a winemaker, a rancher, a spelunker, a monster slayer, a forager, a woodcutter, a truffle hunter, a pillar of the community, and a druid? Shortly after you move into Pelican Town, you discover these little forest spirits called Junimos. They can't spell very well, but they are adorable and run away when they see you. A local wizard gives you a sketchy potion to help you communicate with them, and you find out that they want to help you restore the community center. Here, the game offers you a choice, and its first big objective. Do you want to follow the quests of the Junimos to restore the community center, or do you sell out to your former bosses and participate in the local Joja Mart's Community Development Fund? You see, as quaint as Pelican Town is, it is not immune from the greedy mega corporation you used to work for. Already, Joja Colocans are polluting the town's water systems, and a massive Joja Mart is running the local shops out of business. If you walk into the Joja Mart, you'll be offered a Joja membership, and if you buy it, they will buy the community center and turn it into a warehouse. Joja clearly doesn't have the money to invest in the town on their own, but they will generously take your money if you choose to finance their community development fund. The Joja customer service rep will then put together a work crew and fix up different parts of the town's infrastructure overnight. By choosing to side with forest spirits, you will instead be completing bundles of items. Each bundle will restore a different part of the community center and will motivate the Junimos to fix the infrastructure of the town, but with forest magic instead of power tools. To get the items you will need for the bundles, you will have to diversify the crops and goods you produce and forage for. This requires that you explore all the areas of the valley during each of its seasons, and this in turn will give you more opportunities to participate in the community life of Pelican Town. Working for Joja just requires cold hard cash, but the spirits need a variety of goods to work their magic. The game does not end after the fate of the community center is decided. There are still incentives to explore the desert area for rare materials, turn a dilapidated Joja Mart into a theater you can then use to go on dates, and eventually fix the local fisherman's ship to go to Ginger Island, where you can start a whole secondary farm and explore a volcano. This game is absolutely massive. I have been playing it since it released in 2016 and I have not run out of things to do, especially with the 1.5 update. The pixel graphics convey a lot of character. The cartoony style and how the characters express emotion appeals to my nostalgia for old Harvest Moon games. The simplicity of the art and music masterfully carry the seasonal changes of the map. The fact that it was done by a single person will never cease to blow my mind. I also appreciate how fluid both gender and sexuality are in the game, as the gender that you pick at the beginning of the game has no impact on the list of available characters you can marry, or the options of how you would like your character to look. In fact, later on in the game, you can easily change your gender, and the townsfolk won't skip a beat with your new pronouns. I could go on, but I will just say that I believe this game deserves a 5-star rating. I have mixed feelings about the ecology of Stardew Valley. On the one hand, it is a lovely invitation to dream of a world where we are more connected to nature, where we can meet most of our energy needs by building solar panels and lightning rods, where we can grow our own food, and where we're able to build all-in-one recycling machines that can turn all our trash into useful items overnight. But I wonder if this game is an invitation to realize that dream, or simply to escape into it. Stardew Valley takes place mostly outdoors, and to convey the feeling of curiosity and awe that you get when you are in nature through a video game that you are mostly playing indoors is very impressive. Nature is everywhere in this game. You will constantly be working with domesticated animals and crops, and foraging for wild berries and mushrooms. You'll also see frogs scurrying away when you cut grass, or squirrels dashing for a tree when you approach. This game romanticizes nature. I mean, it very plainly appeals to the longing to flee the modern world and rekindle your connection with nature by moving to a farm. Doing so does not even mean giving up video games. Interestingly, it forces you to consider the impact that you have on the environment through its mechanics. If you don't clear your fields, for example, the terrain becomes impassable. But if you cut down all the trees from your fields, you will quickly find yourself scrambling for wood. After realizing this, you might save some tree seeds and reforest some corner of your farm to make sure you have a renewable supply. There are some ways in which the game invites you to consider how you will relate to your land. During the central decision of the game, whether you restore the community center or help Joja, you might adopt different approaches to agriculture without realizing it. If you side with Joja, you are likely going to grow a single profitable crop each season. After all, Joja only asks for money to develop the town. This is called monoculture farming, which is also incentivized by short-term profit in the real world. It leads to high yields and it demands a lot of resources, as it is often extremely damaging to the soil. Growing the same crops over and over again depletes the same nutrients from the soil over and over again, which in turn increases our need for things such as inorganic fertilizers to keep the fields productive, damaging the soil even more, which then demands more fertilizer and, well, you get the gist. On the other hand, working towards completing the community bundles forces you to diversify your crops, because the bundles consist of a wide variety of items. This is called a polyculture, and if done thoughtfully, it can help the soil recover between harvest cycles. Growing certain crops next to each other not only will help balance out the nutrients that are coming in and out of the soil, some crops might directly help each other to increase their productivity and stay healthy. Cover crops can provide shade and keep the ground from drying out too quickly. Legumes can manage the amount of nitrogen in the soil, which makes nearby crops more productive, and animals can be raised alongside certain plants to manage pests or continuously provide fertilizer. Considering these relationships is called intercropping. Doing so with sustainability and local cultures in mind is called agroecology, and throwing trees into the mix is called agroforestry. If you want to learn more about each of these things, there are links in the description as well. The layer of complexity that emerges by considering how crops could affect each other can make the game more fun, and in fact it does. There are a few examples of ways that crops interact with each other in the game. If you keep honeybees in your farm, for example, you can help them produce more valuable honey by growing flowers near the hive. This might make you consider how to design your farm in a way that benefits the flowers and the bees, while also increasing the value of your honey. Sadly, some interactions nudge the player towards growing a monocrop farm. Certain crops, like melons, pumpkins, and cauliflowers, can turn into a giant version of themselves if planted in clusters. This giant produce bursts into several regular-sized crops if you chop them down with your axe. Both of these mechanics affect the way you will design your farm and make the game more interesting, but one of them suggests better farming practices. After restoring the community center, the objectives that follow start falling somewhere in between these two approaches. The highest level objectives in the game require both lots of money and a few different items. The variety of crops that you grow does get narrower overall as you move into the late game, and some of these endgame objectives will demand that you step away from the farming process in order to spend your energy in other ways, like exploring the different dungeons of the game. Ginger Island was introduced in the 1.5 update, and although I love the amount of late-game content in this update, it also made me reconsider the values of the game when one of the first things you do when you get to this pristine, tropical island is bribe a bunch of parrots to build a resort. By the time you get your secondary farm on the island, you will have realized there are no seasons there, and whatever crop rotation you did between seasons in the valley goes out the window when you can grow the same crops over and over again forever. This is a misunderstanding of how growing seasons work in the tropics. Tropical climates have two seasons, rainy and dry, and they do affect the harvest cycles. In fact, our expectation that tropical products like bananas and avocados be available year-round is actually damaging to the environment, as it demands a lot of energy in transport and maintaining microclimates. In order to spend less time and energy working on your two farms, you will likely have to automate some parts of the process. Sprinklers will keep your fields watered and eventually also fertilized. Junimos can be persuaded to move into your farm and take care of harvesting for a one-time fee and no recurring wages. You can even install auto-petters in your barns and coops, which will keep your animals happy as you become less and less emotionally available to them. Before you know it, your operations start to resemble some practices that the game originally seemed to be critical of. You're employing low-wage workers, you're industrializing your farms, and more importantly, as a player, you're slowly moving away from the part of the game that makes you engage with questions about where our food comes from and how we might connect with the natural world. In this sense, Stardew Valley misses an opportunity to adopt an agroecology philosophy, with one notable exception. The second half of agroecology is considering how local cultures are affected, and a big part of the game is your social life in Pelican Town. Your relationship with the villagers decays over time. All villagers have specific likes and dislikes, and if you want to remain beloved in the valley, you might keep a little polyculture corner in your farm to make sure you always have the best gifts for birthdays. In the end, the game pushes us to prioritize profit and production through industrialization, which is a harmful way to present the options we have around agricultural systems, because in the real world, agroecological approaches have been shown to have comparable or even higher yields than industrial agricultural approaches and to result in higher wages for farmers in the long term. But that is the problem with Stardew Valley. The lack of consequences means we only need to consider the short-term profits, and it never makes us consider sustainability over the long term. After all, we don't feel any of those long-term effects in the environment. Overtilling the soil does not lead to nutrient depletion, nor completely deforesting an area lead to irreparable desertification of the area. Even if you side with Joja, the worst that happens is that the community center becomes a warehouse, but you don't see an increase in the pollution you already find in the game, or experience any change in the game's environment. This game is beautiful, and it is an interesting chance to foster a love for the natural world, to learn about agriculture, and to think about where our food comes from. For many of us, it can make us long for a life with a deeper connection with nature. It carries within it a wholesome, romantic, anti-corporate message. However, something about the idyllic timelessness of this game lets us get away without facing the hard questions that these themes can raise. 50 years can go by, and not only will your character not age, and your children never grow past toddlers, the seasons will remain constant, the villagers will repeat the same things at each festival, climate will not change, and however much you industrialize your farm and abuse your soil, your farm will not be any less productive. And when you put down the controller, you might walk away with some bad ideas about how we farm and why. Which is why I think this game gets 2.5 out of 5 leaves from me. Have you played Stardew Valley? What do you think of the way its mechanics portray nature and its relationship to agriculture? It's such a special game, and it's so hard to be critical of it. If you want to respond to this critique, please do so in the comments below, or come share your thoughts on Twitch. If you like this eco-review, like it. And if you like games and the environment, consider sharing, or better yet, subscribe and check out Patreon. This has been Fel Fairy. Thanks for watching, and remember to hit pause and touch grass.